Tell the folks a little bit about Rich Cirminiello, Campus Insiders, and what you do, and a little bit about your background, how you got into college football. In the Northeast, not many people into college football.
Yeah, which was part of the design a little bit. You know, I wanted to be a little more involved in college football here in a pro football town, and it's obviously worked out. I've been at it for 15 years. Got into it at the beginning of the century, internet-wise. Always loved college football, fascinated by the churning of coaches, churning of players year after year, and little by little it's built itself into a great industry.
And not only is it just the great industry of college football, but now it's become a fantasy industry, a fantasy go-to for those that just don't want to play regular football, or professional football rather, on Sunday. Well, Saturday gives you a ton of games to choose from. Does that make it harder with so many games, so many programs to choose from?
Well, it's infinitely harder, Greg, obviously, because you're talking about 128 FBS programs versus 32 NFL programs. So purely in terms of numbers, but there's also the turnover. You have turnover year after year. Kids oftentimes leaving after their junior season. So you have to be familiar with these players, these offenses, these new coaches and systems every year. So it's a greater degree of challenge. I find that very interesting. I find it compelling.
Now, price-wise, because we know the dynastic programs, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, for instance, they're always around. They're always going to be there. LSU as well. Are the guys there, Cardale Jones when he was starting, for instance, are those guys there more expensive than perhaps the smaller schools, but they still may put up some points, which is fine for us in DFS. Yeah. We don't care if they're going for a national championship or not. Are they more expensive because the general population has heard of a Cardale Jones?
I think that's built in. I think because you're familiar with an SC, Cody Kessler. Ohio State, J.T. Barrett. It doesn't matter who the program is. Texas, you're going to have more appeal, more mass appeal. You know more about them.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that a Brandon Dowdy at Western Kentucky is going to be forgotten. But when you dig deeper into those rosters and deeper into those Sun Belts, Conference USAs, there are some real gems at every position, particularly at the skill positions, running back and wide receiver.
And I am totally with you there because for me, playing daily fantasy basketball, for instance, the numbers there with the Philadelphia 76ers were atrocious, but somebody's got to score. And I'm looking forward to daily college basketball, which kicks off tonight with so many games on the slate. But I want guys on Rhode Island. I want guys on BYU like Kyle Collinsworth, right? I don't necessarily need the Marcus Pages if he was healthy, Melo Trimble at Maryland. I don't need those guys necessarily because these smaller schools, they're going to put up points, just like the worst teams in the NBA, for instance. All these guys put up points.
How many players do you have to follow? At maximum, these guys are there for 4 years playing, if they're playing as freshmen.
Right.
And there's such turnover. It's not like the NFL. I mean, and there's turnover in the NFL, but 128 Division I programs?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, the roster, how many people suiting up? 80 or standing on the sideline?
Yeah.
I don't get it when a couple of guys have the same number.
Offense and defense.
But how do you follow all these guys, and how does that work? And how do you then forget about them now they're in the NFL and you got a new guy? And how does that?
It's not. I mean, for me, having done this for 15 years, Mike, it's never a June to September process. This really begins in January.
Sure.
I mean, it has to be a 12-month process to be familiar with all of these teams, all of these players, and then furthermore, I'm always familiar with new staffs. Who's the new offensive coordinator? Who's the new defensive coordinator? Oklahoma, for instance, right? Different offense last year. Samaje Perine is the focal point of the offense, the running game. Now they go to a new offensive coordinator in Lincoln Riley. They pluck him out of East Carolina, air raid offense. And now Baker Mayfield is a stud from a fantasy perspective. So, I think the time has to be invested. From my perspective, it is genuinely a January to December process, and really trying to take in as much as possible. Because even in the summer, you may be in love with a particular player. There are kids losing jobs on a routine basis, especially as freshmen are coming into the mix.
Which brings me to Ohio State that kind of has all of that in the mix. Tom Herman leaves. He goes to Houston, who's doing a tremendous job in Houston. We were just talking before we went on the air what kind of job he did with all these quarterbacks in the past. They've made quarterback switches during the season now. One of their quarterbacks is a wide receiver that's been prolific for daily fantasy purposes. So what do you make of the Ohio State Buckeyes for daily fantasy?
Well, I think Ohio State is a built-in machine. I think it's obviously different than Houston. Houston is, You're going to have a couple of players that are appealing. Greg Ward Jr., perfect fit for Tom Herman and what he wants to do offensively, wants an athletic quarterback, somebody who can make plays outside of the pocket. In terms of Ohio State, you're getting those blue chip players. You're getting the Ezekiel Elliott. You're getting the Jalen Smith. You're getting the 5-star type players, Jalen Marshall. You're getting players that are elite, but you're also going to be you got to bring it year after year if you want to start. And there's also going to be some degree of divvying up of touches in a program like that.
I want to talk a little bit about what I call the ESPN effect. So when I was a kid, the powerhouse programs were the powerhouse programs. And if you were the best, I grew up on Long Island, and if you were the best in the tri-state area, you went to either Notre Dame or USC,
Penn State,
or Nebraska or Alabama or wherever it was. Now, if you live in Oregon, you go to Oregon. Or you can live in anywhere and be on national TV and stay kind of local. Or if Alabama, you're not going to start there, and somebody in Missouri State tells you you're going to start over there, you can go over there, and you're still on TV. So does that make sense to you?
It does. Yeah. No, and I think the word that comes to mind...
And there's a lot more parity because
that was the word I was going to, was parity, exactly. Because a generation ago, you went to those programs because that was your best vehicle to get seen and then get to the NFL. That's really what it all comes down to. Now, listen, if you are a talent that can go to Florida, you're not choosing Florida Atlantic over Florida, and I understand that. But if you're a 2-star, 3-star player, we've seen a lot in the past few years. There was a wide receiver by the name of Deontay Greenberry. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, from Houston. He had an option between the Cougars and Notre Dame. Now, a generation ago, he would have chosen the Irish.
Absolutely.
Right? 7 days a week. But he goes to Houston because he realizes the exposure different. You don't have an NBC contract. You're not on national TV every week. But
you're going to start, too.
You're going to be seen. And you're going to play. And he played as a true freshman.
Well, I kind of equate that to, think about this. The best player in the world of professional basketball doesn't play in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago. Plays in Cleveland. Plays in Cleveland, Ohio. And then perhaps the second best player plays where? Oklahoma City.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So...
And does it make a difference? It makes no difference in terms of exposure.
It just doesn't. And years ago,
the world we live in now, particularly with social media and how expansive that is, you can't hide. It doesn't matter where you are. You can't hide. Now, again, if you're at Louisiana Lafayette, you're not getting the same exposure. And I understand that. But if you're a player, you're going to get noticed. You're going to get talked about, particularly with fantasy, which is why I love daily fantasy with college. Because now, who is going to pay attention to South Alabama last night?
I will if I'm playing.
The kids and their parents.
Yep.
Right? Maybe 14 alums.
Yep.
But if you're involved, now all of a sudden, Joey Jones's football team, you want to know a little bit about it.
And we talked before, Mike, about the commissioners being all for it, right? And the leagues being behind the daily fantasy game. Well, think about this, right? You're following guys in South Alabama. A guy like Ben Roethlisberger goes to Miami of Ohio, and Joe Flacco winds up at Delaware, and Cam Newton goes through all of this trouble from Florida to somewhere else, to Auburn, and this makes the draft now more interesting because, wow, I know that player.
Didn't Russell Wilson change in the middle?
Yeah.
Sure, Russell Wilson went from NC State to Wisconsin, absolutely.
What was the story with that?
Well, he wasn't going to start anymore at NC State.
Tom O'Brien did not commit to him, which was an egregious error.
They went with the long neck.
Mike Glennon.
Mike Glennon.
Oh, yeah. I actually broadcasted Russell Wilson in college. Yeah. So, yeah, you're going to be more interested in watching the draft because, the first round, okay, we have heard all of these prospects because for the last 3 months we followed it.
Sure.
But now you're going to care about the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds because we've played daily fantasy for the last year.
To me, the entire pie gets larger.
Yes.
Why would you possibly bite the hand that feeds you? You're now bringing more attention to programs that otherwise... And you know what? It expands beyond television ratings and radio ratings. How about local beat writers and newspapers?
Yep.
Now you're getting more hits to your particular location. Now, Northwestern and Justin Jackson, you're like, I want to read those local Evanston newspapers. Who else would be doing that other than fans of the program?
100%. And I find myself...